First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge a couple things. None of this is possible without the leadership of Dave Dallas. And so, can I give him a quick warm up? Yeah, and then you'll notice we're being videoed. So Coco Fox, who's located in the Bend area. And so can we give them a little bit of a round of applause? Yeah. And last but least, this guy fixes a lot of technological headaches across the campus. It's Devon, so. And we'll pretend this is EOU, so let's thank EOU. Right. So real quick, we're going to warm our minds up real quick. So you could just kind of like be able to stick your right leg out in front of you. I'm going to show you that multitasking doesn't work. All right, it's a myth. Harvard's proved it, that every time you're doing something and you're in deep concentration and your cell phone goes off or an email alerts you, you lower your IQ. Believe it or not. So we talk about that. So take your right foot and make it go clockwise. Okay? Now I need this right hand like this. So do this for me real quick. And while it's going clockwise, I want you to draw the number 6 right in front of you. Not a circle, the number 6. Come on, keep it clockwise. This isn't a 6. Do a 6. Come on. You can do it. Number 6. All right, so let's take that same leg and go counterclockwise. And we're going to do the number 8. Some people are like this. Oh, I can do it. I see they're like doing the infinity. It's hard, isn't it? Sometimes you're like, oh, it's just because I'm tired. No, that's a challenging piece. Like this, some people can do this, but can everybody do this? Not everybody can do that. Can you? Some people are like, oh, how do I do that? I can do that in my sleep all day long. It's opposite. Think about that. Hunter S. Thompson could do that. So some people are like, how do I get my brain wired like that? You can do it with your eyes closed. So warming up the brain is really important. So we're going to talk about the guts of teaching. And so you've heard a lot of this is the third full time of me talking about the guts. I'm going to tell a story. Okay. I've told a lot of stories, but I'm going to tell a story about a guy I knew in high school. Okay, I knew a guy in high school who was on the wrestling team. And during his junior year, he decided that grades weren't important. Okay, so those grades kind of just fell. We have the Ascent 2029. This was the descent of scores. And so the next year, he realized he lost his wrestling scholarship. So it came about the time in the school year when he could sign up for college fairs. Well, he signed up because he really wanted to go to college. And so he got one of those slips that, they used to put on the door and take roll. And somebody came in and said, school counselor wants to see this gentleman. And so they went in and they were like, notice you're signed up for Friday's college fairs. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to allow it because you're a C student and you're really not cut for college. And so he was like, okay. Parents never went to college, first gen kid. And so with that stress, he just thought, okay, it's part of life. Well, when it came time for the college fair, they had the kids in each classroom stand up that was not going to be allowed to go to the college fair in front of all the other students and made them go to study hall. So it was kind of what you'd consider like profiling or first selection. So everyone knew who wasn't going to college. You're poor, you come from Oaklawn. Oaklawn was a community outside of Derby, Kansas, where the homes were built for World War II Boeing workers. Then right after Boeing and the war, they were going to bulldoze them because they were called stick-built or throwaway homes. But slumlords moved in and said, we'll buy this property from you for a good amount of money. And so it maintained. Same with Plainview. Plainview grew into a community in Wichita, Kansas, that some homes have 4 or 5 families in them. So Plainview is its own community. Okay, so So a lot of those kids were kind of like lifted up and sent to the gas chamber because they were not going to go. They were gassed, is what I would describe it. So graduation came, and they had a thing called senior celebration, where they take all the seniors and they make them stay at the school, and they keep them there so there's no drunk driving, blame on the school. So this guy gets home at 5 o'clock in the morning. His dad's in the kitchen drinking coffee. And his dad says, "Do you have a job yet?" And he was like, "I graduated yesterday." He's like, "Get a job. You're not going to college now because you lost your scholarship." So he finds a job working for an electrical company. It's kind of like a gopher. You go for this, you go for that, you go for this, you go for that. Most of the people he worked with were high all the time. He made $3.34 an hour. So imagine you working full-time, 40 plus, 50 plus hours a week at $3.34 an hour. We wanted a better job, so he applied at a place called Keiss Industries, where he got paid $3.60 an hour. He's rich. So he got a job in packing and shipping, and then got a job running a giant metal lathe, which is probably as long as that wall. It's a giant machine that came down and cut metal. And the company loved efficiency, so they took the protective guard off so your fingers can get really close to the blade, and your fingers had to stay there so the metal didn't move, and this giant blade came down right at your fingertips, which OSHA loves that, by the way. So with that, he would get up every morning because you had to clock in by 7 or you lost your sick or your vacation days, which you only had a couple vacation days. Then it came time for the Christmas holiday, and people were talking about, we're getting our Christmas bonus. Get in line for your Christmas bonus. So everybody came around, all the welders, everybody, big factory place, dirty. Everybody got in line for the Christmas bonuses. And by the time he went up and got his Christmas bonus, they'd reached in a box and handed him a tin of a spiced ham about that big. He goes, "Oh, thank you. But where do we get our Christmas bonus?" He goes, "That's your Christmas bonus. It's a canned ham." And he thought, wait a minute, okay, so I work all these hours a week, and my bonus was a ham. Took it home, gave it to his mom. She cut it up, made it into sandwiches or ham salad or something. But he knew that wasn't going to be their future. So he went to his mother and said, "I want to go to college." His mom was like, "We can't afford to send you to any place like that." So he checked into a place called Butler Community College at McConnell Air Force Base. It's where they had a kind of a site on a military base. And he just signed up. And so he paid his tuition. So his tuition for 9 hours was $185. Can you imagine if your tuition for 9 hours was $185? And his books, he couldn't believe he had to write a check for under $30, it was around $30 for his textbooks. All his textbooks. He was like, what a ripoff. Can you imagine all your textbooks being $30? For all of them, not one, all of them. Went to community college, and he had an English teacher that was from Russia. He had a teacher that taught, he was an officer. He taught contemporary issues. So he brought guest speakers to his class, and many of them were like prostitutes from the street, which was like, what? These are contemporary issues. He just brought them in. So these women that he recruited, like, "Hey, you want to come talk to my college class? I'll buy you a hot meal." So you learn straight from the resources. This is before a lot of technology, no internet. Then he had a sociology teacher that turned him on to a movie called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And like, this is critical thinking. You need to watch this. And we're kind of like, what? And so this sociology teacher said, "Oh, I'm going to take everybody to pizza after this class." So it's kind of this motley crew of students learning and so forth in pizza. And he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll buy all the pizza if you give me really good evaluations at the end." They don't like me because I'm radical, because I push against kind of white dominance here at the school. Now, this is a long time ago, and so you didn't push back. He also had a math teacher that during his lecture, he smoked while he lectured in mathematics. So he smoked during the whole class. So imagine you're in a class where your professors could smoke. Times are different, right? Can you imagine if your professor lit up and started smoking and talking to you? You're like, okay, you've lost your mind. So he literally saved every dollar he had, and he said, "I'm going to go away to a college called Pittsburgh State University." Remember, he'd never go to college. Gave all his money to his mom, said, send me money weekly. Well, it calculated out for the whole year, he would get $35 a week to live off of. So imagine that's all you get. That's everything. There's no credit cards, there's no... So very slim year, got into college, and then got a roommate in the dorms, and his first roommate was, I'd consider, a pathological liar. He told everybody his mom owned Quasar, and his Porsche was getting detailed, and that's why it wasn't there in the campus, and ended up having a falling out with his girlfriend, and left. So then he was roommate free. Then he had another guy came in. This guy was kind of like Don McLean, who's a deceased singer. Drove a VW Bug, dressed like he came out of the country club, actually came out of Johnson County money, but was addicted to narcotics. So one night, busted with narcotics, kicked out of school. So he knew he needed a roommate, or they would move him to a certain kind of like different dorm location. He liked his dorm location. So he was walking by the dorm one day and he smelled this really sour smell coming from the bottom of this door. Well, he knew the person that was in there, so he knocked on it, and this guy opened up the door. He had like thin side brows, covered in tattoos, which was very rare for Kansas. He had Social Distortion, he had Sam Hain, he had Danzig, then he had Stray Cats. He's like, hey, you can smell those drugs coming from under your door. You probably need to stop because you get kicked out. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll probably put a wet towel under there. And he was like, oh, by the way, I noticed that your roommate left. You seem like the most normal person here. Do you want to be new roommates? And the guy was like, sure, we'll move in together. But he's like, you can't do drugs in the dorm room. I don't want to get kicked out of school. He's like, no big deal. So moved in together and went through their freshman year. And one of the things he kept with him was, no matter how tired or no matter how stressed he was, he would never miss a class. Why? Because these students that like slept in and were dropping out around him never welded for a place that gave you a spiced ham for Christmas bonus. So it took a lot of guts. So he went on through college, was misadvised by an advisor, so he didn't get to graduate on time. So he'd take a summer class, and his advisor's like, hey, you can still walk, and you'll pretend like you graduated and lie in front of all your family, you know, because none of us have ever been misadvised, ever, just this individual. You know, it's always perfect advising. So got to graduation, packed up everything, left. Took a summer class called Anatomy and Physiology that he needed. And so the last lecture in A&P, the instructor was going over the final and looked at him and said, you just need to teach this class. And he was embarrassed and was like, what? And so got through that program, decided, you know, teaching is a good field to be in, but wanted to get a graduate degree because he was told he'd never go to college. Applied to graduate school. The summer got the letter back from Wichita State University. Too embarrassed for failure again, threw it on a dresser. And so the entire month of May and June went by because he didn't want a rejection. So he decided to open it and said, we regret to inform you, of course, didn't get in, you forgot to put your application fee and check in there. So he's like, oh, great. So he put the check in, got into graduate school. Accelerated right away, was top of his class. To a point that he had a professor named Dr. Lori Miller, who had a PhD or two of them, Juris Doctorate, and they actually had 85% of their grade was a project, 15% was a test. So she said, come on, turn in some of your ideas so we can see where you're at. He turned in 36 pages bound for the first night. And when he handed it to her, she went, what? Looked at him. Everybody else was handing pieces of paper or 3x5 cards. Next week in class, she was going through lecture and everything. But then she goes, I've been reading everybody's ideas. And she goes, but if you take so-and-so over here, he's already an A+ in this class. Every head turned and looked at him. So after class, there was a line. And they were like, can we have a copy of your project? I'll meet you at Kinko's. So they could see what A or A+ could look like. Went on through graduate school, went back and got a second degree in undergraduate in a Jesuit college to learn the philosophical versions of teaching sciences. And then eventually applied at a second master's at Kansas State, got a phone call and said, why are you applying for a second master's? You apply for your PhD. Oh no. Those are really, really smart people. And they connect him to a gentleman who said, what are you doing tomorrow? Well, I'm actually off. I'm a teacher. There's no school. Well, I'm in my office at 7 a.m. And he was like, but you're like 75 miles away. He goes, I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Drove up there. Guy got him enrolled. PhD program. Did all his classes while working full-time as a fixed-term instructor. Did all his classes in 1 year. Took 18 credits of doctoral level coursework per semester, which made the major professor upset because she says, you're making us look like a University of Phoenix. Then the next year, completed the doctoral thesis in a year, did it both in 2 years while working full time. Major professor was like, what drives you? I'd never go to college. He'd never go to college. So went on, became a professor, accelerated, got into the National Teacher Hall of Fame, won Outstanding Alumni of the Year, because he never go to college. Ended up teaching college anatomy and physiology and chemistry and biology at a community college while being a teacher under the person that said you need to teach a class. Went on to teach people that went on to become medical doctors, PAs, and just kept doing this. Worked at an evening place to help people get their GEDs, then one day ended up here talking to you, the Dean of the College of Education. That's my story, and to talk about the guts of teaching. I was told in high school, you'll never go to college. So what type of guts does it take to get through those type of life lessons when you're told you can't do this? Can't be in a vocabulary as a teacher. You just can't do it. Well, why? Just dig a hole and jump in it. So as long as I was upright on this side of the dirt, I didn't apply to can't. So when I went to Newman University, I studied under these elite minds, these priests. Dr. Father Baver, I mean, he wrote a book, look him up. Boever, look at his book on Amazon. He wrote about Cardinal Newman, but from his perspective, he was a rebel priest. The roommate in the dorms, Todd Hignite. Todd Hignite's book. This is the guy with the sideburns. He wrote the biography about Jaime Hernandez, a Mexican immigrant who wrote the famous comic series, Love and Rockets, out of California. Him and his little brother were doing comics in Mexico as illustrators. They came over illegally. You'll see if you go to YouTube, Todd Hignite, Hignite. Todd's sitting there like, yeah, I wanted to interview him. But if he took off his clothes, he's covered in tattoos. His book on Amazon sells for like $80 if you can get it. He was my roommate in the dorms. Went on to be kind of famous. He lives in New York City. His art gallery, his art sells for a fortune. I had his art, and I threw it away when I graduated college. Some of his art sells in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, what are you like, this is stupid. You know, Todd Hignite was good friends, and I met Mike Ness of Social Distortion, because Todd was from inner city East St. Louis. Todd was supporting diversity, and Todd is as plain as paper before people talked about equity. I mean, when I walked in high school, my graduation, I walked with a black student. Didn't know anything different. Angela Fowler. My parents didn't say anything. People were like, look. Guys wore green, girls wore white. Now everybody wears the same color at that high school. We didn't separate. This is who we are. Angela Fowler went on, married a guy in the Air Force. Behind her was George Teague. Go look up George Teague. Dallas Cowboy, defended the Star in 2000, 2001. Made the front page of Sports Illustrated for University of Alabama. For the greatest steal in the national championship of all time, Derby High School, right behind us. Todd Hignite. So this guy was connected to these people. This guy who never go to college, his cousin, just retired, was the CEO of Carnival Cruise Lines. And he shut down cruises to countries that didn't accept LGBT+. He would not allow cruises to go through there. It's on US News. I grew up on a dairy farm next to him. These are Kansas people that he never went to college. His brother Steve started off fixing Bobcats. He's now the vice president of Casey Bobcat. Never went to college. So the guts that you have form around situations and scenarios. You can tell your own story. So with that, I'm going to show you a video clip. This is a tough video clip to digest. So we're going to transition from that into the guts of teaching. So what's going to happen is I'm going to pause the video. We're going to take a deep breath. This is an actual documentary. It's not staged. It's not actresses and acting. You know, so what you're going to see in this kid right here, we're going to look at Cornelius, number 3. We're going to watch what happens with Cornelius. Here's what I want you to look at from a perspective and window with him. Look how the principal stands in front of him. Look how she's talking to him like she's the authority. Then watch what happens when she decides to call mom. And then after we see mom's interaction with Cornelius, we're going to take a moment of silence and pause. And then I want you to get with somebody, following social distance. And I want you to think about what you would have done in this situation as a teacher, and what you would have done differently, or what you would have done kind of to support it. So watch closely.
He says he just called one person that name.
Think, Cornelius. Who else did you call that?
Trevor.
And who else?
You.
Right, and who else?
Oh.
That's it.
Cornelius continues to act out. Today he walks out of his special education class after calling one of his teachers and a few of his classmates retards.
Well, you'll see him later because he's got a slew of apology letters to write. And the other thing is I've got to call his mother and let her know. When's the last time you took your medication?
Watch close. She's got her hand on him.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's why I need some help. What I'm asking you to, Cornelius, I'm not going to put my hands on you, but I'm asking you to leave now.
Yeah.
I want you to go with Mrs. Wolf. Well, you're not talking to me, and you're not going to get your own way.
I'm staying here.
Okay, well, then Mrs. Wolf will go.
Look at the windows. It's covered in unpenetrable outside, not razor wire. So always you look at some place when you drive by and go, is there razor wire on the inside, outside, or both? They don't want people in or out. They don't want people in, or they don't want people out when we think about that. But this one is kind of like, okay, it's a school, right? And they have this kind of wiring. Is that in the glass or on the outside of the glass? Is it protective glass? Are we assuming it's kind of like on the outside, like don't come in, or is it in the glass for breakaway glass? So if a kid dove through the window, they wouldn't get cut as bad because the metal would hold onto the glass. Is it tempered glass? Is it not tempered glass? Tempered glass is kind of the side windows of your car that break and shatter everywhere. Windshield is laminated glass. But these are some of the features we don't pick up in the schools we work in.
Go and get your mother, and then when she comes, I'm going to tell her exactly what happened. You're an intelligent person, you're a thinking person.
No, because I'm going to stay here.
You can come back.
No.
You don't have
I'm
to
gonna stay now.
Well, then you go out there and sit on the green chair until Mrs. Wolf comes back with your mother.
No. I'm staying.
You can stay on the green chair, Cornelius. Let's go.
No.
Listen to me. Look at me. Just look at me for a minute. Are you an intelligent person?
No.
You said you wanted to stay here. Is that true?
Yeah.
Then you need to go and sit on that chair, and you need to do it now.
No, but I want to stay. I ain't going.
Stay where?
Here.
I said you can stay here, but you can sit on the chair. I have to meet with people now.
No. I want.
Then go home with Mrs. Wolf.
I don't want. I need one more chance.
I can't give you another chance about contacting your mother. The other choice is to suspend you, and I don't want to do that. I would.
She's taller, towering above. They did a research study in early childhood education. They brought in a 90-year-old man and a professional basketball player, and they asked the young kids who's older, and they pointed to the basketball player, not the 90-year-old man, because kids look at us like this in fear all the time. So he's got his arms crossed. He's looking away. He's asking for another chance. She's asking him if you're smart. Are you smart? What do I want to know? Are you intelligent? Are you intelligent? Because only intelligent people get to hang around a guy who never was supposed to go to college. I'll be signing autographs at the end of this, by the way. I'm so amazing. No, I mean, honestly, like, whoa, practice some more humility. You're a little full of yourself. But look, so she's towering above him. I'm sure he's scared, right? Remember, guts of teaching. This takes a lot of guts. You're going to be talking about this with somebody after this, kind of like, oh, well, I would have sat down, or I would do this, or, so keep this kind of metacognition, which means thinking about your thinking. Metacognition means thinking about your thinking. Boom, 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 thinking about your thinking. Somebody's walking towards me with a gun. Metacognitive thinking. I'm thinking about my thinking. What do I do? Do I yell, hey, hold on a minute. There's like 4 of my friends in the bushes over here. And they're all MMA fighters.
You too much if you weren't here at school. But I do need you to listen to me right now, and I expect you to go.
But I want to stay to my class.
You can't stay in your class right now. And please do not speak to me like that, okay?
Well, I ain't going home.
You're not going home. I know. You're going to go sit on the green chair.
Nope.
Cornelius, you have 2 minutes to move out of that corner and go sit on the green chair. Otherwise, you're not going to be here tomorrow.
Do you feel the fear and do it anyway? Remember that when you teach. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Alex Honnold said, he's a free climber. He said, stop being afraid of fear. In this situation, how do you stop being afraid of fear? I don't fear anything right now.
Cornelius's mother is called to the principal's office to discuss her son's behavior.
I'm so glad to see you. Have a seat there. I could see that we weren't going to get anywhere with him. So I told him that he had a choice to go sit on the green chair or walk home with Mrs. Wolf to see if you were at home. He refused, and he stayed up there in the corner of this room, right up there in the corner, and told me that he wanted another chance. And I said, I'm giving you choices, but I have to let your mom know what you called the other children and what you called Mr. Walsh. And he tells me that he hasn't had his medication for a couple days.
Yeah, but that's just a crutch.
Okay.
Okay? Don't get it in your mind because you don't have your medication. That
Watch
gives you
him.
a privilege to act like a fool around here. And in that case, then, since you ain't had your medication, I ain't had mine either, okay? We both gonna act fools today, all right?
Chiquina, I know that you're upset. Okay, and I don't want you to be upset this way. But what I want you to do is tell him that you and I are together on this, and he's supposed to listen, he's supposed to do his work, and that if he doesn't, we can walk him home and you'll be there waiting for him.
You're gonna make me hurt you. I'm not telling him nothing because I went through this last year with you. Matter of fact, you're going home. I'm gonna show you. I'm not gonna tell you anything. Let's go. And I'm gonna punch you in your face, okay? Because I told you I'm not going through this year up here.
Chiquina,
Go get your jacket now. You wanna show off? Fool, you get up! I'm tired of you with that dumb stuff. Go get your jacket. I'm gonna break your behind when you get home.
Okay. She walked by, Mother Bear walked by how many males? Security guard, other people stood and watched. She was still going in pursuit. So what do you do legally? Do you get between a mother bear and her cub as a teacher? I was always told never wear dangling earrings. They can get pulled off. Necklaces. You're like, wait a minute, I don't know. This is real. Takes a lot of guts to watch this. I've been showing this video since 2004. This is 1992. Inner city Philadelphia. Everybody should watch this video before they teach. It's called I'm a Promise. You're going to watch the whole video and go, I give up. How about the girl who lives with her grandfather, who's a scholar, but it's not her grandfather. She showed up one day and goes, I have to start living with you. And he goes, I don't have kids. And he said, imagine a stray cat shows up to your front door one day. And he just let it in. And he raised this girl on a documentary saying she should be in protective custody because she lived in a crack house. Her parents were filth because they were addicted to drugs to her. So you witness this. It takes a lot of guts. You wake up in the morning. You're like, God, that was hard. I don't know. I don't know. I've had so many students just be beside themselves like, okay, so how do I find a school where this wouldn't happen? Or maybe I should be an online teacher. Avoid the fear. But it can happen. We train you for classroom management, behavior management, psychological management, self-care, health, mental health. But how does your mental health, like I just ran a half marathon on Sunday, and this is Monday. So you can see, this is the security guard. He's standing close to her. Principal's all dressed up, completely different high poverty situation. Like she's the authority. Kind of find a shoulder partner and talk about what you would do with a situation like this. Go for it. Talk loud, whatever you want. Just talk with somebody. How do you mentally get through this situation? All right, so we're getting kind of quieter here. I've never shown the next part ever since 2004. You're on your own. Find out what happens. So there are so many different scenes in this that I could show you. This is not just one. You watch the whole video. I learned about this video from a guy named Merle Patterson, who's a building administrator in El Dorado, Kansas. And he showed this to a very rural area. In El Dorado, Kansas, they have a school called Oil Hill, because it's an oil community. There's a patch of land in El Dorado, Kansas that produced more oil than anywhere in North America. They have a school called Oil Hill Elementary. It's in the middle kind of town, but it's not El Dorado School. It belongs to Circle District. You know why? People are like, well, what? Why would a school belong to a different town that's in another town? Because they refused to serve hot meals to kids of roughneck workers. Not kids of color. If your dad was an oil worker, whatever color he was, you were not privileged to a hot meal. They refused to. So a judge sided with families, and they still refused. So Circle said, we'll take the school. And then they took the school. And that school, though, at its time, had perfect behavior management in the school. Perfect. You know why? Because if you got in trouble at school, your dad lost his job at the refinery. Can you imagine coming home and your dad's sitting there going, I lost my job today because you got in a fight at school? That's in the heartland of Kansas. Then they have an area that you can walk around. It's gone. It's called Oil Hill Community, where all the roughneck workers lived. Had their own little community that's now bulldozed. They kind of kept the roughneck workers, oil field workers, away from their common society. So let's hear from some of the groups. What are some of the things you talked about and thought about? Volunteers. Yes?
His tone of voice is very demanding of him, and he just seems to get more closed off the more you like him.
That's a good point. Do you think he hears demands a lot in his life? Go to bed, pick up your stuff, come on.
I think based on looking at body language with it, I feel like you need to get on their level and understand that as soon as she mentioned his mom, the demeanor changed in the kid.
Didn't he? He did.
That she should have picked up on and been like, maybe I need to look into this and not just be using it. And as soon as she walked in, something should have been aware.
That's right. Excellent.
Well, I mean, I was thinking the kind of the same thing, but how, she's threatening him, and honestly, if I was a principal and she's screaming like that, saying that she's gonna punch him
in the face.
Yeah, I would probably be like, why would you call CPS?
Yeah.
So
She said that with cameras pointing at her. She wasn't, there were no filters. Not like, oh, there's a media crew over here, I should watch what I say. And if I told you to watch him, he flinches. He flinches. So that means this has happened before.
You're going to make me hurt you. I'm not telling him nothing because I went through this last year with you. Matter of fact, you're going home. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to tell you anything. Let's go. And I'm going to punch you in your...
Flinched. He looked up at her, and then he popped his head back. He flinched. He's been hit before. It's like a puppy. Never hit a puppy. It doesn't know anything or hurt a puppy. But if you do it again, the puppy's going to flinch. It knows what's coming. Why do we flinch? Because it's a defense mechanism, but he's trapped. Imagine being trapped. You can't go anywhere. This happens at home. This happens at school. This happens at home. This happens on the street. This happens at school. Why do we have high crime? Why do we have delinquency? Why do we have kids turning to alternative modes? To get out of this. Because this is trauma. Okay? This isn't complex trauma. This is chronic trauma. Chronic means it happens over and over. Poverty is chronic trauma. I'm hungry every single day. Complex is really hard to untangle. It's sexual abuse with a kid. Acute is a blow to the head. Her hitting him is acute trauma. This is chronic trauma. He feels chronic trauma every day. Every day. I wake up, I'm hungry. I'm angry. I go to school. I'm told I'm not very smart. I'm put in the corner. Chronic trauma. How do teachers have the guts to get a kid out of chronic trauma? I suffered acute trauma. When I was in kindergarten, it was a beautiful fall day and I was running across the campus. I just felt this blow and I woke up in the nurse's office. She goes, "Oh, Mercy, you've been asleep all day. I've been trying to call your mom." This is before cell phones, mobile phones. This is before answering machines. She was out shopping all day. Well, I took a blow to the head from a teeter-totter, from a 6th grader coming down. Changed my world. Well, what happens back then is if you get a blow to your head, your mom puts a cold washcloth on it. But after that, I became an insomniac. I could remember everything. Everything, every number, every detail, every type of clothing. How people did their hair after that. I mean, I can remember people's phone numbers. They gave it to me. Merle Patterson, 316-323-9816. I mean, that's a cell phone number. I don't even have a program in my phone. You know, but that is called acute trauma. Her hitting him, acute. This is chronic trauma. Look at him, look at her, right here. Look at the eyes. Now remember, she brought the mom to him at school. She brought that chronic trauma to him. The principal did. Looking back, do you think the principal would do something different? So now does that kid think of that teacher or that principal? I don't trust you. Have I ever had that situation? Absolutely. In 2nd grade, I had journals. Had a girl named Donna, and I saw in her journal, and by the 3rd page, she had her throat getting cut and blood dripping down. And I was like, ah. So I pulled her out in the hallway. I was like, "Hey, can you tell me about your book, Donna?" She's like, "No, I don't want to, Mr. Seimears. No." I'm like, "No, but just tell me a little bit about it." And she's like, "No, because if I tell you, you'll tell someone else." I lied. I said, no, I won't tell anybody. She goes, "We have to sleep with knives under our pillows." She's 2nd grade, this big, beautiful child, always dressed so nice. Dangling earrings. I'm like, "Knives under your pillows?" And she's like, "Yeah, and I'm afraid someone's going to come in at night and cut my throat." So I took the book to Mrs. Todd, our school psychologist, and Mrs. Todd said, "This is the worst I've ever seen." Get social work involved, go to our parents' home, clean food. It's part of their culture to ward off spirits. But to a 2nd grader, they don't understand that. And she looked at me and said, "You lied to me. You told somebody else. I will never trust you again." I had to teach her the rest of the year. She never gained my trust again. What do I do, though? You know, it's like somebody once asked an attorney friend of mine, you have a kid that comes to school and he's got bruises on his body. Do you take pictures of the bruises? That attorney, who I know is probably the smartest gentleman on the planet in the law, he's been a practicing attorney over 40 years. He looked at my student and said, "That's a question they'd ask on the bar exam. I'm going to come back to that." Then in the end of his presentation, he looked at him and said, "You call SRS and you say, 'I have a student with bruises on their bodies. Should I take pictures of them?' Let them tell you if you should take pictures." Because if you have suspected abuse in your classroom, By law, you're a mandated reporter by your license. You blow the whistle. If your principal tells you, you don't blow the whistle until I come in and I interact with you, you'll get fired. In Kansas, at least. You're a mandated reporter. You're a mandated reporter. You hold a license to teaching. That's one of the most powerful things, like a license to perform surgery, a license to practice law, a license to teach. It's one of the most powerful licenses on the planet. It takes a lot of guts. So, other groups, what else did you talk about? Yes?
Something that we were talking about, and Jill said that there are no bad kids. She said that was a really powerful quote for her. And we were talking about how you can tell the students' needs are not being met, and that might be the cause of them acting out. So, and we were actually talking about at breakfast this morning too, that it's like the kids aren't, that when they're acting out, there's something going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not because they're bad kids, it's because
Right.
there's something going on.
There's hurt. There's scar. There's trauma. There was no, I created a trauma program here because there was nothing for me. I had to write my own trauma curriculum. There was nothing out there. Kids were just bad kids. You're just a bad kid. Well, kids aren't, they become who they are through certain situations and experiences. You know, for example, I taught 8th grade, the roughest middle school. 90% of my students were, all my students were ESOL students, but I had some that weren't, and I taught ESOL science. So if we were really good, we got in our 8th hour, 7th, 8th hour, we got to go to a classroom that they had couches, and we were allowed to show a movie. And so I was going through all the movies, and so I was like, I'll just grab this one the first time and showed them Fast and the Furious. And they were disrespectful. They were just kind of loud. And so I was like, I don't even want to deal with this kind of reward ship anymore. So we got it again, and I told the class, I'm like, I don't want to go back to the room because you guys are rude. They always did that with their mouth, like disrespect back to you. So finally I was like, okay, I'm gonna give you one more chance. Take them back to the room, and I couldn't find the movie I wanted, so I just grabbed this movie. And I was like, we'll see about this. And I popped it, and they didn't see the case, and I put it in. And it started, and they were talking, and they were just being loud. And as soon as the movie started, they stopped talking. And then they just turned to the TV and sat there, and I watched them. And I just kind of like, this is the best classroom behavior management I've ever seen. And the whole movie, if anybody talked, they'd shush them. Shh, shh, shh. So I thought nothing of it. Probably a month or two goes by, and we finally are in the room again. And I was like, so we were in that room. You guys did earn your trust. You really wanted to go there. Like, no. If we go back, can you show that movie that had no color? And that family, that guy starts, there's a lot of whistling at the beginning, and that guy and his kid are walking down with fishing poles. And then that woman cooked for him, and then they sat at a table together and ate. Do people do that? And I'm like, what? It's the Andy Griffith Show. They'd never seen life the way people experienced it. Some of them come home and don't even eat. I said, you guys don't eat together as a family? They're like, what? I've never sat at a dinner table with my family. Are you kidding me? I was like, who cooks your meals? Me. I grab something from the fridge if it's there. If not, I hunt the cupboard. If not, I get a little money and I go down to the convenience store and I eat on the street. They'd never seen life, even though there's controversy with that type of movie, but they'd never seen something calm. So imagine, since this is chronic trauma, not complex trauma, it almost became acute trauma. She hits him, that's acute trauma. This is chronic trauma, opens over. Like I said, poverty, hunger, chronic trauma. Bullying, chronic trauma. Profiling because of who you are or what you wear, chronic trauma. How many kids have to go to school and deal with the fact they're different, but they live a life of chronic trauma in school because they're different? What's different? I've always been looking for the term difference. That's chronic trauma. And so you separate that. So what I recommend you do is, when you're going through a teacher ed program, study the trauma pieces that any program can offer you. Because if you can sort out what kind of trauma these kids are going through, because even kids that have a lot of money go through trauma. I knew a kid, his dad owned Pizza Hut Corporation of Florida. His dad went to college with the Carney brothers. Well, Pizza Hut started in Wichita, Kansas. Carney brothers went to Wichita State. Well, they were in class with a guy named Mike Dart. Mike Dart was an accounting major. And they were like, we're starting this pizza place called Pizza Hut. If you do our books for you, we'll give you franchises. Like, come on. You're not going to make it. You'll be closed. He's like, we'll do it. So they started giving him franchises. Before you know it, he owned Pizza Hut Corporation of Florida. Was very successful. Well, his son had so many resources, kind of wasn't so successful. You know, I knew kids that were very wealthy, but because of the pressure of maintaining that status, they struggled. They were in more drugs and kids in poverty than I knew. Because the pressure to always excel what dad is. Where I came from, Wichita had a lot of wealthy people. They had the Koch brothers, billionaires. They actually had Rent-A-Center started there. Blockbuster families, Pizza Hut. Very wealthy places. And some of these spawned. Phil Ruffin, Sr., owns MGM in Vegas. He lives in Wichita, Kansas. You know, I mean, he's a billionaire. But their kids had a lot of pressure. It's a different kind of pressure, but that's still chronic trauma. The expectation to be successful, a D1 athlete, be like your father once was, or your mother, or your guardian. You know, your brother won 4 state championships. What's up with you? What's going on? The scene in Stand By Me of the young boy whose brother was killed in a car wreck, but he was the star athlete. And the dad always tried to hold him up to that pedestal. You know, so that's chronic trauma. So think about that. How do we live in a world free of chronic trauma or complex or acute? Through our teachers, through the lenses in the classrooms, where kids can live trauma-free and they're protected. You know, there's a gentleman named Albert Colum. His documentary is called A Touch of Greatness, one of the best documentaries ever. He was driven out of teaching because his students liked him more than they liked their parents. And the parents complained, all the kids do is come home and talk about school and math. And they drove him out of teaching. A Touch of Greatness is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. His students came back to honor him. They were genetic counselors. They were doctors. They were actors. And he finally left because he couldn't stand the pressure. He was good friends with a guy named Robert Downey Sr. Robert Downey Sr. filmed all his classes with all these kids in it in the documentary back in the 50s. Because he did theatrical plays with his kids in his classrooms. He took the kids outside to learn. Parents were like, no, they should be in desks. They should be miserable. They should hate school. They should be punished. But these great teachers found ways for kids to leave trauma. You know, kind of like the society, what we want people to be like us with us. So the guts to get there is surviving through this, but learning from it. Another guts it takes to be a teacher is every day is going to be a challenge, but it's the greatest challenges because you get to handle them. Some of the things you won't like that it'll kind of wear you out as a teacher is your administrators. They're probably not going to see eye to eye as you, so you've got to find ways around that. Administrators that care, administrators that don't care. Administrators that are there for the salary because they want the money. They want to leave the classroom to be the principal. I was in an elementary school that had 100% purge of teachers and administrators until there were 2 left. That everybody was new because they couldn't handle the administrative framework. New administrator, great, we're going to do it, we're going to do this. So 1 year with an administrator, we're not going to have recess this year. What? We're in an inner city school, these kids need activity. We're going to read to them during recess time, these new Harry Potter books. So we're going to get their intellect up, to get our reading scores up. So I was part of a school a year that banned recess. Boy, howdy, let me tell you about those reading scores that were going to go up. Where do you think they went? Way down, the worst ever. Well, that didn't work. Let's move that administrator out and bring a new one in. And this one's going to sprinkle lucky dust over everything. And that's how we're going to get kids to learn, is use lucky dust. I mean, you just get tired, like, just let me teach. Just let me teach. Questions you ask when you get interviewed. How do you support first-year teachers, second-year teachers? What resources do you have for them? Do you have mentor systems? Do you have coaching systems for them? What makes this school the best school in Oregon for elementary teachers? Put them on the spot. How do you combat chronic trauma? We don't know what that is. Or acute or complex. How do you combat it? How do you provide resources to help us with those kind of traumatic situations? And if they can't answer that, do you want to teach in that building? I mean, those are some of the big factors you face because this is your career. There's towns that will take you and pay for your home to get you to be a teacher in rural Oregon. Crane, Burns, they need teachers so bad. They let you be in charge of your own curriculum. That's another question, is what's the curriculum? Is this curriculum kind of like anti-diverse? How do you unpack out curriculum to find that? How do you thematically weave in your own talents into your own curriculum? Is it cookbook teaching? Is it recipe teaching? Is it Saxon math, where you're not allowed to add your talents? Where you're just kind of a robo-teacher? Oh, we got this curriculum because the teachers are terrible. Our teachers that we've hired through the years are terrible, so we got a kind of mandated curriculum. So those talents are there. So it takes a lot of guts to deal with situations like this. Your mental health, your self-care, your personal life and growth. When you answer emails, do you answer emails? Do you send out handwritten thank you notes to parents? Nobody does that anymore. Everybody gets an email, right? And everybody gets what texts are. Do you ever like, oh my gosh, look, I got a text message from somebody. Everybody gather around. We're going to dinner tonight so we can read this text together. Who wants to go to dinner? Dad's buying. So we can read, I'm going to read you this text. What's up? LOL. Isn't that amazing? No, because you get text messages. But somebody handwrites you something and tells you we appreciate you or thank you. If you get a job interview and you wrote a hand thank you card to people, thank you so much for our services or your time. People don't do that anymore. Those are the things, like write it to a kid that I appreciate you today. Put it in their backpack, they don't even know. They get home and a bunch of colored stars fall on the ground. And then they're like, I got spanked for that. You're like, whoa, I was just being grateful. I mean, that can happen. Now I got to vacuum the carpet because you're a teacher. I mean, you're just like, but I was being nice. So then you just put a scratch and stiff sticker inside that note. And at night when they're stressed out, they can smell pork-flavored ice cream. No, the grape or the root beer. They can lay on their pillow. When everything is failing around them, you know, Napoleon said, soldiers will fight long and hard for bits of ribbon. They'll die for a ribbon. I'm amazed what a kid will do for a scratch and stiff sticker. I couldn't believe it. There's this in this video, you'll see a kid get a sticker and he rubs it like 4 times. There's a video in here where the camera crew shows up before it's light. There's a kid sitting on a step, a kindergarten. They're like, well, they're not purposely filming, kind of. They're like, what are you doing to school here in a gang-infested, drug-infested neighborhood this early? He goes, my auntie told me to leave and go to school. Where's your auntie? He was like, in bed. And he's eating the bottom end of the muffin. Somebody ate the top end of the muffin. He got the bottom end. If you look closely at that, like, as a teacher, you can pick that up, bam. He's eating the bottom end of the muffin. He's a bottom half kid. I'm the top muffin kid, as you see in Seinfeld. I get the top muffin, you get the leftovers. You get the growl. So that's, what are you, a bottom muffin kid or your top muffin kid? Who are my bottom muffins, who are my top muffins? You'll know. I mean, honestly. It'll consume you and it'll make you go broke. Because you'll want to spend all your money on them. You know, on them all the time. We did it once. We helped a family in need and they came back and said, can you do this every year for us? And we were like, what? Put together a pool of money for you because you're a house fire? And like, oh no, we didn't spend any money on the clothes or anything like that. We went on a vacation. No, it was supposed to replenish your clothes and your kids' shoes. Yeah, they went on a NASCAR vacation and didn't bring the kids. So we paid for the kids to stay home and still have bad clothes, bad teacher decision. How do you do that? So think about the guts that it takes to form these situations. There's better stories than there are worse stories. But sometimes you need to see the worst to get to the good. If we lied to you and said, it's always perfect. Boot camp in the Marines is amazing. It's like Club Med. You'll sleep as long as you want. You'll get to go from a buffet of food, and then you go to boot camp. You're like, this person lied to me. We're going to tell you some of the things that you're going to experience as a teacher. And it shouldn't drive you away. But it should simply say, I'm going to make a change. Because I can. Take care.